You are listening to a free version of the Majority Report with Sam Steeder. To support the show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019. My name is Sam Steeder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, last night's swing states elections, a cautionary tale for the Democrats. And congratulations, America. We're now officially bathing in the cruel and unusual era. Chicago elects its first African-American woman and openly gay mayor. And the left makes big strides on Chicago's city council. Meanwhile, the House votes to subpoena the Mueller report and Chief White House Personnel Security Director. Corruption probes crisscross North Carolina's Republican Party. And Wisconsin allowed to pull out of the Obamacare lawsuit. It appears the Ecuadorian government is on the verge of booting Julian Assange. And Trump punts the fake health care plan to 2021. Meanwhile, the Trump administration okays dangerous baby strollers. Yes. Seriously. Turns out Bernie is the Trump of the left.
Dana Milbeck is such an idiot.
I guess that means I win.
I guess good news for me.
Meanwhile, 70% of the country is unaffordable to the average American homebuyer. And lastly, Dems blow it on the defense budget. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is Wednesday. And Matt is out. Brendan is very diligently and confidently operating the board today.
Flying this water boat just right.
You're doing very well on that. Let's start. We will be. I mean, we're going to have to play the thing where Donald Trump can't say the word origins, but just because it's too funny. But before we get to that, let's get to the part that's not so funny. Here is Donald Trump calling for the abolishing of immigration judges. I don't know exactly how this would work, but there has to be some process for adjudicating the asylum claims of people unless we essentially roll back the asylum laws and say that there cannot be any asylum in this country, that we will reject any folks who are subject to the myriad of reasons why we might offer them asylum in this country, who, of course, narrowed the opportunities for asylum for largely people from Latin and Central America in terms of domestic abuse or fear from gangs. But here's Donald Trump. Here's another solution to this. Just get rid of the judges so that there's no way to adjudicate these, I guess. I mean, it's gobbledygook, but let's listen.
And what we have to do is Congress has to meet quickly and make a deal. I could do it in 45 minutes. We need to get rid of chain migration. We need to get rid of catch and release and visa lottery. And we have to do something about asylum. And to be honest with you, I have to get rid of judges. Every time, and you won't even believe this, Mr. Secretary General, you catch somebody that's coming illegally into your country, and they bring them to a court. And
they bring him to a court. Can you
And
believe
the Secretary General of NATO is like, yes, this is crazy.
Oh, my God.
I mean, who ever heard of such a thing? You have courts? We don't do that in the Eurozone.
No, we have large tubs of water. We just throw them in. And if they float...
they might be getting close to that in some areas.
It's possible.
Just for the record, the number of people who are granted asylum by judges right now is fairly low.
Oh, it's. I don't think it's certainly not higher than 30% of the cases that go in. I think it's somewhere between 20 and 30% is my understanding. But it slows the process down that they have to contemplate whether. I mean, this is just absurd, and it's not a legitimate proposal. Of course, none of it is. It's all absurd, it really Donald Trump is running on his strength. He is returning and reverting to the mean, which is we're going to attack. I mean, this is when he rode down that escalator. The one thing that really resonated from his opening speech when he ran in 2016 was that they're sending over their worst rapists and whatnot. I'm sure some of them are good people.
It's his leitmotif.
Indeed. And speaking of that motif, here is Kris Kobach, the possible pick for Trump's immigration czar. Recall that Kris Kobach was laughed out of multiple courts on his attempt to disenfranchise voters. And this guy really, really has it in for non-white people and their ability to vote. He was a charlatan going around to various counties, I think, across the country, getting them to dump people from their roles and then offering his legal services to represent them in the court cases that proceeded, and then lost the cases. But here is Kris Kobach on with Lou Dobbs.
And this one is deploy immediately dozens of immigration judges, as well as a fleet of passenger planes, and the thousands of empty mobile home trailers that the United States owns right now and is attempting to sell at bargain prices on the internet. Instead of selling them, deploy them to border cities and create processing towns that are confined. And so when someone comes in and falsely claims asylum, we don't release them for 6 months onto the streets of the United States. We process them right there in that camp where they have the 3 square meals, they're living in a nice mobile home, and then as soon as they're done, as soon as the claim is rejected, they're on the next plane back home. And then the people back home suddenly realize, hey, he just left here 2 weeks ago, and yet he's back. Maybe going in these caravans isn't such a great deal anymore.
All right, so the theory is that what we're going to do is build areas that are obviously we're going to have to put fences around them. And what it will do is it will sort of concentrate them in these camps. That's what we're looking to do. We're going to try and concentrate in these crossing towns, concentrate them in these camps, and they'll have nice little trailers to live in, and we'll give them 3 square a day.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, indeed. And
maybe we'll give them some work to do.
This whole theory
that work is the real freedom.
This whole theory that they're going to get sent home 2 weeks later and tell all their friends, like, don't bother going, again, either is purposefully ignorant or just completely uncaring as to the situation that forced them out of the country in the first place. The reason why you get people who get booted from this country and then they come back again and attempt to come in is because their living conditions, their situation in which they are returned to is untenable. So even the traveling itself becomes a way of escaping that. And so the bottom line is we've seen the benefits of actually providing aid to these countries. There's plenty of data to show that as we provide more aid to these countries, they have the ability at least to protect some of their own citizens. And, but it just goes to show that there's a lot of disingenuousness here. I mean, none of this is
fascism is not genuine.
And
It's usually in the road to its fascism.
They're basically doing what he said already. Like a small number of people get out on parole. Most people are kept in what they call hileras, or ice boxes, which they keep very, very cold on purpose so that people will give up and go back.
And that's why we also have now something at least 15,000 children that we're warehousing, because they've also scared the relatives of those kids from coming to pick them up. So that's all been mission accomplished, ladies and gentlemen. Just a reminder, even if we eat kale salads and drink green smoothies, we're most likely not getting all the essential nutrients we need on a daily basis. Enter Ritual, the obsessively researched vitamin for women. In 2 easy-to-take capsules, Ritual provides 9 nutrients you need to support a strong foundation for your health, all in their clean, absorbable forms. I, of course, as you know, am not a woman. I have not been taking this, but we have farmed out the process of taking these vitamins. And I can tell you we've gotten very good recommendations. Apparently, the big thing is that they source the vitamins that are in Ritual. So you can tell where your omega-3 is coming from, your vitamin B12, your iron, your vitamin D3, your boron. Apparently, that's really good for bones, is my understanding, but I don't know. I'm not a doctor. And one of the best things I've been told about Ritual is that it reminds you to continue to take them after you've finished them. So in other words, you finish a bottle, the next bottle is there. That has always been my problem with taking vitamins. Like, I'm supposed to be taking those vitamin Ds. I forget, and then when they run out, I forget to get a new thing. All of Ritual's vegan-friendly, sugar-free, non-GMO, gluten-free, and allergen-free ingredients, all their sources are out there and for the world to see. It's only $1 a day to have all the essential nutrients your body needs delivered every month. No strings attached. Better health doesn't happen overnight, folks. And right now, Ritual is offering my listeners 10% off during your first 3 months. Fill in the gaps in your diet with Essential for Women, a small step that helps support a healthy foundation for your body. Visit ritual.com/majority to start your Ritual today. That's 10% off during your first 3 months at ritual.com/majority. Also, the Majority Report is being supported in part today by Simple Habit. Simple Habit, a mobile app, provides a massive and diverse library of 5-minute guided meditations. And the Majority Report audience can try Simple Habit totally free for an entire week when you go to simplehabit.com/majority. There is lots of research out there.
Plethora of research.
I put Michael on it, and even with his research skills, found immediately stress.
What I did was I was like, let's see what Wikipedia say about this. It looks like a lot.
Stress. It helps you with stress. It helps you with
depression, pain,
sleeping,
anxiety, sleeping.
Sharpens your mind. A lot of people say meditating makes them more productive. Simple Habit has over 2,000 guided meditations especially designed for different parts of your day, just about anything you might be dealing with in life. They have guided meditations for mindfulness, meditations for anxiety, for depression, for when you're having trouble falling asleep, for when you're wanting to overcome procrastination, or when you have something important going on at work. Meditations designed for parents. I feel like I could have that on I should just have that blaring in my house anytime I get home with the kids.
I want it blaring in here.
I'm not going to say which child did this, but I can tell you that one of my children last night threw a very big fit. I let them watch, one of them watch a 24-minute television program. And I said, he asked me if he could at the end of the day, can I watch one? So I got dinner prepared, and I was like, yes. And they said, oh, but wait, we're going to take a bath first. 30 minutes of calling me a liar and telling me that he hates me.
Well, I mean, frankly, you should be a little bit more clear in your words.
I should have. That's exactly what he said.
Yeah, I think he's got a point there.
They have meditations made specifically for when you're waking up or your lunch break, or when you've gotten home from work, when you're going to bed. Different people are trying to accomplish different things with meditation, and Simple Habit is able to cater to just about anyone, regardless of what their goals are with meditation or how much past experience you've had with meditation. The variety of guided meditations on Simple Habit is what sets it apart. Simple Habit just won the 2018 Google Play Award for Best Well-Being App. It's available for iOS, Android, web browser, and the Majority Report audience can try it for free for a week by going to simplehabit.com/majority. That's simplehabit.com/majority. And if you're watching or listening to this program, we've put it in the descriptions below. So check it out.
Hey, Rachel, how's ritual working for you?
I knew that was coming. Oh,
you did you? Because you
did.
have sharpened acuity because of your female supplements?
Yes.
Boom.
You got me. All right, so let's talk about what took place last night. There's really two big things I wanted to get to. One is this ruling in the Supreme Court, and this is really, I mean, let's start with the Supreme Court. So I guess this was 2 days ago now. Supreme Court was looking at a case, Bucklew versus Presseth. I don't know who Presseth is. Probably somebody associated with a prison or, and it was a case involving a guy who was on death row. This guy, Russell Bucklew, he committed a brutal murder in 1996. He was sentenced to die. And the guy has what is known as cavernous hemorrhagia. It's a disease which causes basically tumors to grow around your head and your neck and your throat. And this guy, Bucklew, was going to be killed by the state of Missouri. And they wanted to give him a shot of lethal dose of barbiturate pentorubidol. I don't know what the name of it is. And however, Bucklew is afraid that the drug is going to cause him to essentially choke on his own tumors, causing him extreme pain and suffering in the last minutes before he dies. And most of this stuff is I'm reading from Ian Millhiser, who writes for, I think this Think Progress is legal. He's the legal editor over there. And so the idea is that, the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution says that you could not have punishment that involves cruel and unusual punishment. And this guy, Bucklew, is arguing that, well, it is cruel, in particular, to kill me in such a way that I'm going to suffer dramatically at my death. And for literally decades, the way that the Supreme Court has viewed the idea of cruel and unusual is that cruel, obviously, or I should say unusual, implies that a particular punishment has become less and less common. Right? And as it becomes less and less common because people just become repulsed by it, it actually becomes, its constitutional foundations become weaker. So there is this concept, as Justice Earl Warren explained in 1958, that the Eighth Amendment prohibits punishments that defy, quote, evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. So back in the day, right, like 1500, you were going to kill somebody. One of the ways they would do it is they would cut your stomach open. They, tie you down, cut your stomach open, let your entrails come out.
It was a tough deal.
And that was just the way that we kill people. And then maybe we chop their head off.
An eye for an eye.
Over time, however, we found that kind of punishment to be grotesque and overly cruel. And apparently, this standard has been tossed by Gorsuch in favor of a standard that the unusual measure is pegged to the time of the framing of the Constitution. What? So Gorsuch was talking about punishments that would have been forbidden at the time of the framing. Quote, these included such disgusting practices as dragging the prisoner to the place of the execution, disemboweling, quartering, public dissection, burning alive, all of which Blackstone, he's referring to another judge, savored of torture or cruelty. He adds that by the time of the founding, these methods had long fallen out of use and so had become unusual. So unusual is not an evolving standard. It is one that is pegged to basically 200 some odd years ago.
That is actually originalism in a nutshell. That's one of the reasons it's such an incredibly fraudulent, doltish way of reading the Constitution.
You got to put him up a little bit. I can't.
That's.
Are you talking into the microphone?
Yeah, absolutely. That's originalism.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
That's originalism is a structural problem. I mean, that's their standard for everything.
Yes. And so he defines the word unusual to mean punishments that had long fallen out of use at the time of the founding, not punishments that are uncommon today. So this evolving standards of decency in the context of the Eighth Amendment has been thrown out. And the definition of cruelty for this guy has also changed under a case in 2015 called the Glossop v. Gross case. Because that case determined that the death penalty enjoys some form, according to Ian Millhiser, of super legal status that protects it even from private citizens who refuse to be complicit in executions. Glossop, and I think people might remember this, is when there were drug manufacturers who decided that the drugs that they were selling, which weren't developed necessarily to kill people, refused to sell those drugs to states that wanted to use them to kill people. And so what happened is that some states turned to other drugs, painkillers of questionable reliability, which, according to Elena Kagan, writes Millhiser, left death row inmates with the feeling of being burned alive. And that because that was the case, that was a torturous death and amounted to being cruel. At the time, the conservative majority, Sam Alito, who wrote the Glossop opinion, dismissed the drug company's refusal to be complicit in executions as a guerrilla war against the death penalty. And he held that because it is settled that the capital punishment is constitutional, it necessarily means that the way of that the idea of executing people, there must be a constitutional way in which to do it. So in other words, if it's constitutional to kill people, the means in which you kill people must also be constitutional, or at least one must exist. And so if there's only one option to kill people, and even if it happens to be super painful, that is not enough to prevent the execution. So the idea is, and in this instance, the burden at that point falls upon, if you can believe this, the prisoner and their lawyer to come up with another way in which they can be killed. And there's even a greater burden, because this guy in Bucklew said, okay, well, I have another idea. You can asphyxiate me with nitrogen gas. Put me in a room, pour some nitrogen gas in there, I'll die. According to Gorsuch, that's not enough. You got to come up with a plan that describes how we can protect the people who administer it, that we can protect the, like, you got to come up with the whole thing.
You need to, like, redesign the prison, all right?
Death row inmates must not only tell the courts how they wish to be killed, they must offer a proposal that is, quote, sufficiently detailed to permit a finding that the state could carry it out relatively easy and relatively quickly.
So he's just a sadist.
Well, but here's the thing. Oh, yeah, no, he's a sadist. So that is basically a slight sideshow. It does not give prisoners a very easy way, essentially, to come up with an alternative that's not going to be super painful. So the bar in which you can suggest some other way has been raised to where you can't just suggest another way that you want to be killed. You got to suggest another way to be killed that will make it easy for the state and safe for the state. And you need to have that proposal really drawn out. So in the absence of that, you can be killed in a way that is extremely painful because, A, the definition of unusual really only pertains to things that were unusual 200 years ago, 250, and the definition of cruel now is not something that is cruel, de facto cruel. It'll cause you a ton of pain, yes. But that's not the legal standard for what is cruel, according to the Supreme Court now. The legal standard for cruel is if the intent is to cause you a lot of pain.
Yes, and the intent will be, as ever, undeterminable.
Well,
and even if we had brain imaging software to prove somebody's intent, we couldn't use it because that wasn't accounted for 200 years ago when the Constitution was written.
No.
How would you do that?
How would you? This is how the court would determine that the intent is to make you to be cruel.
If somebody wrote it,
if you, as a someone on death row, wrote out with your lawyer an extremely detailed plan with schematics and how this you were going to be killed by using some type of nitrogen gas that was going to make it perfectly safe for everybody and would involve no risk, would be super easy, not too prohibitively expensive. And then the state said, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to do the one that's going to cause you a tremendous amount of cruelty.
It was all specced out. That really speaks poorly of you.
That's how you would prove that intent.
Could you not argue that having a prisoner write the sort of specific details and logistics of how they're going to be killed is a form of torture in and of itself?
No,
I mean,
you could argue that, but no, you would not have a hearing at the Supreme Court.
Right, but you would be
what kind of circular logic is that to say that cruel and unusual punishment is constitutional because killing people is constitutional?
Well, that is that's the way that they work.
It doesn't make any sense. Although I guess, killing people in and of itself is cruel and unusual. So in that sense, they might be right.
They have not found that the actual act of capital punishment is cruel and unusual. Then they're just assessing the means in which you do it. So understand, though, what this means. Aside from it meaning, and there have been less and less executions as we evolve, mostly in non-red states. A couple of blue states, I think, still have it. But as we evolve as a species and decide that the state should not be permitted to execute people in cold blood, and I'm happy to have this debate about capital punishment, but that's aside. The import of this is not only that we can do this in a what any normal human being would consider cruel and unusual in terms of the of killing people, but that this group on the Supreme Court, as is constituted now, these 5 have no problem overturning 50 years of precedent, 60 really. And they're not terribly explicit about it. In other words, they're not saying we're overturning this precedent because we found it to be X, Y, or Z. They are just reinterpreting things like unusual, reinterpreting things like cruel.
Well, this position allows you to be the ultimate judicial activist, because if everything that is written at the time of the founding is essentially illegitimate, then actually it gives you an incredible amount of room to hack away at a couple hundred years of legal work.
I mean,
without any intellectual coherence or rigor. And this whole thing, people really should look at even, as distinct from the PR and the communications aspects, but the origins of things like the Federalist Society as these august academic projects are just another arm of PR machinery. It's fake law to not only against evolving standards liberal law, but against even common law. Established
we're
precedent.
lucky that there's an amendment abolishing slavery except as a punishment, or they would probably try to bring that back too.
Right. Well, it's still there for prisoners. You can still do it according to the 13th Amendment. All right. And the reason why I started with that one is because in Wisconsin, and obviously a state court doesn't necessarily deal with doesn't deal with U.S. constitutional issues, but it has. But the import of our courts, completely understated, I think, by far too many on the left. We're starting to see people discuss it now in the context of some of the proposals that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are proposing, insofar as you think the courts are going to let you do that? Now, that's a battle that I think we should have and make it more explicit, but it's a real shame that it's going to take another 15, 20 years before people go through the process of realizing how important the courts are and then actually starting acting upon it. Maybe AOC will be able to implement those policies that Sanders proposes in 2021, 10 years later, after she adds 2 more people to the court. But we'll see. But last night, there was elections across the country. Well, not across the country, but I guess sort of spanning the country. There was an important one in Pennsylvania. There was obviously some important local races in Chicago. And there was a hugely important one in Wisconsin. Last April, 2018, there was a statewide race for the state Supreme Court where, and I don't know if they actually register as partisan, Democrat or Republican, but the Democrats supported one candidate, Republicans supported another. Democrats crushed them. And I think if you'll recall, that's when Scott Walker said, ring the alarm bells. There's a real problem here. We're going to have a real problem in the midterms in 2018. And he was right. There was a huge win for Democrats in the fall. Now, of course, Wisconsin is famous for having where Democrats can win 54% of the vote and only get 36% or literally 36 seats out of 100 in the state Senate. The problem is redistricting and gerrymandering. And really the only way to deal with that, now that the Supreme Court has all but said, like, yeah, we don't care. And not only have they said they're on the verge of saying we don't care, they're also on the verge of saying, and these independent commissions that you set up, these nonpartisan, this vehicle you have to make sure that they're somewhat fair so that you don't have a situation where 54% of the people vote for a specific party and only 36 out of 100 of their representatives win. Those independent commissions, those may not be constitutional either, because the role, the authority to draw these districts is given specifically to the state legislatures, and they cannot outsource that even to an independent commission. So winning the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, in a state specifically, not just like Wisconsin, but specifically Wisconsin, is huge. Because once you own the state legislature, you also then can start to disenfranchise a lot of voters. This is the way it works. And that's what they've done. 1 million people voted last night. 1.1, actually. Million people. More, 1.2 million, I think. And the Democratic-backed candidate trails the Republican-backed candidate by more than 5,000 votes. So you're going to see a recount, but 5,000 votes, hard to imagine where that's going to be made up. Unclear if it's going to head to a runoff or a recount. But apparently there just was not the kind of turnout from the Milwaukee area that we hope. Now, I don't know if there's a failure of not enough money being poured into that race, whether it's an institutional failure, the institutions and the big money don't appreciate the importance of this, or frankly, your average voter, 7/8 of your 1/8 of your average voter just does not appreciate the importance of this stuff. This was a Democratic leaning, a liberal, however you want to describe it, a liberal vote on the court. She had to step down because she has cancer. So this is now the Democrats, the liberals, however you want to call it, they were, I think it's like 4-3, and now it's going to be 5-2. So the idea was they wanted it 4-3, and then they wanted the presidential election where voters come out in a lot bigger numbers to carry the day and then take the state Supreme Court. Milwaukee County not performing as well for the liberal side as it did in 2018. 2018, the liberal candidate won by 41,000 votes, 31.5 points. This time, 97 precincts in, margin is 30,000 votes and 24 points. So you just have 10, 11, 12,000 people. Again, if that number sounds familiar to you when it comes to Wisconsin, it should. Because that's 2016. Just sitting it out. And I get the argument you need to have better candidates, but I'm sorry. Out of that 1.2 million people who voted, if there are 10,000 people in there who can articulate the difference between a left-leaning judge and a right-leaning judge in any sophisticated way in terms of the state Supreme Court, and I would include myself as being not part of that percentage that could, then I'd be shocked. This is basically, broadly speaking, because people don't have the time to dig into the intricacies of state law and determine the voting patterns or the decisions and read the decisions of potential state Supreme Court candidates. This is good guy, bad guy. This is not a persuasion situation. It is a mobilization. And part of that mobilization has to be to make people understand the stakes of a state Supreme Court and of a federal Supreme Court.
Well, it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because I want everyone to vote for progressives in every election, and progressives can't do anything if they're not in office. I also understand that a lot of people have heard it all before, and they don't make a connection with how this is going to help their lives. So it's a little column A, a little column B.
The problem is, like, these people will come out to vote in 2020, but it's going to be too late in 2020 to save the state Supreme Court. I don't know who's in charge of making people understand the relevance of the state Supreme Court. It's a failure of our civics. It's a failure of our education. It's a failure of left-leaning groups, frankly, to articulate the importance of these seats to the voters. And, it's there. I don't even think they're affiliated with the party per se, and I don't think you can be partisan to sit on there. But certainly the Democratic Party had a vested interest in getting people out to vote. It's just they've got to figure it out. They've got to figure it out. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, in a suburban seat, and this I think is indicative of, when we talk about the surge in voting, right, that we saw in 2018. We talk about the resistance, as it were. I know that's a bad word, and it's associated with bad people. But whatever you want to call it, a Navy veteran who served in George W. Bush's Department of Veteran Affairs won a special election to fill a state Senate seat in suburban Pittsburgh. This is a district President Trump won in 2016. Pam Iovino will represent the state Senate district that covers parts of Allegheny and Washington counties after she beat out D. Raja, a businessman who chairs the Allegheny County Republican Party. He took 51% of the vote in that suburban district. The fact is that white suburban women, many respects, are driving a lot of the pickups that we saw in 20. I mean, we talked about that leading up to the election. There's a lot of data to support that, but this is more. Here it is. This is Democrats flip this Pennsylvania Senate district. SD 37 was last up in 2016 when then Senator Guy Reschenthaler won by 22%, as Trump carried it by 6%. That is a big flip. Big flip. So earlier this year, though, Republicans won a Democratic-held seats in Minnesota, Connecticut, and Kentucky. So this is the first seat of the year flipped from Republican control to Democratic hands. So there's been some demobilization in specific areas of the Democratic coalition. And so people got to get to work. Still going on in the suburbs, apparently, though, which is interesting.
Well, can I offer a potential counterpoint? Not necessarily a counterpoint, but something that we need to worry about. It might be slightly out of keeping with the blame the electorate theme.
Whoa, what is that?
So, and I do think of Malaika Jabali's stuff on. Probably nobody knows more about African-American voters in Milwaukee than her, right? And so, sure, all of the things you said are true. People in general need to know about the importance of these races. I'm also curious about how did races get scheduled like this time-wise to begin with. Like an obscure off election in April is obviously not favorable.
1.2 million people. Yes, I'm
That's
sure.
true. That's true. But I mean, it should. But regardless, it should.
Well, she had cancer.
It should. Right. Okay. Fair enough. That's true. But it should always be a pivot point to talk about universal registration and things like that, which I know you agree with. But I think a difference, though, in mobilization between, people in the suburbs and people in a place like Milwaukee is that if you are in the suburbs, you can, and you're very comfortable financially, your politics can be an expression primarily of just cultural disgust with a certain party, as contrasted with a group of people that have felt correctly that a party has steadily not delivered for them. Now, again, I'm not mitigating the importance of the vote, so I don't want to get down that rabbit hole. But I do think it does attest to some bigger problems and structural challenges they need to take on.
How do you account for the drop-off between 2018 and now?
Well, how do you account for the drop-off between 2012 and 2016?
Oh, I think that explanation goes well. I think there was a sense that, and I think there was. I think there's multiple things. I think people
there's multiple.
People thought it wasn't that important.
Yeah,
people thought that
what
the maybe the differences weren't so dramatic, and maybe some people thought Trump was going to lose. But when you talk about the difference of like 6 or 7 months, to me, it just resonates that they just don't see the importance of the state Supreme Court. And so I think there has to be an attempt to educate people to the importance of such things.
I agree with that.
I would imagine too, that coming out in
educate, convince, persuade.
It's persuade.
Mobilize.
I think
educate still sounds a little condescending.
Yeah, I think I agree. I have that same sort of concern.
Well, I think, frankly, there's a lot of people who don't have any sense of the importance of the courts. Do you want to say tell them, but as opposed to educate? But I don't think there's. I think people. People need to be educated on it, and it is a difference between a state Senate seat and in the suburbs because it's a more localized race. Not nearly as many people voted, I'm sure, in that Pittsburgh race, and there's also an argument. I think that without the same amount of media attention you get from a federal election, people just don't think it's as important. So they don't take work off that day, or they can't take work off that day, or they don't take their one day off that they can, or their one time that they go in late. I understand there's a lot of different factors here.
But in terms of electoral politics in general, if we want to talk about 2016 as well, or if we want to talk about people in the UK even, I'm still thinking about those people in the black barber shop in Milwaukee that the New York Times interviewed around the time of the 2016 election who didn't vote and did not believe that it was going to make any measurable impact on their lives who the president was. And I saw in the UK, Novara Media, Ash Sarkar spoke to some non-white teens, working class teens, about labor and about Jeremy Corbyn. And they're like, Jeremy Corbyn can suck my dick. Like, we've heard it all before and nobody ever does anything for us. Labor hasn't done anything for working people for a really long time. So it's
hard on Jeremy Corbyn's knees. It's a little fragile.
Indeed. So it's really, it's a catch-22, like I said.
Yes, but I'm comparing it from 2018 to 6 months later and saying, what accounts for that? Like, why, if there was that failure in 2016 to communicate to people the stakes of it, why did it work in 2018, 2 years later, but not 7 months
later?
In 2018,
also
4 months later.
In 2018, just the pure, you're not going to be able to run a campaign for a state judgeship with the mobilization effects of I want to just cast a vote against Donald Trump. That's a pretty clear difference.
There's still 1.2 million people voted.
But that's a pretty obvious reason there in terms of why people should. Even if you go to where I go, I have never seen turnout.
So the argument
I actually saw more people. I actually saw more people in 2018 for a midterm than I did in 2016. And it was purely to register in opposition to Trump. That was the overarching message of the midterms, for sure. And that's much harder to leverage that for a judge's race in April. I mean,
all right.
yeah,
well, I mean, I
hard.
think arguing that the 2018 election is driven that much by Donald Trump, which I think is true. I think also that may hold to 2020.
Yes.
I
agree with that. When have I said otherwise?
All right.
I've never. I don't even know what you're sort of intimating, but I've the one who said from the beginning that I think basically any Democrat could beat him. So I don't know if you're trying to get some.
No, I just think that is. I mean, that runs a little bit contrary to the idea that there has to be a reason for better candidates for that to bring people out to vote.
It's too linear. Like there's definitely an atmospheric and broader dissatisfaction that, again, please read I don't know if you've read her articles in Intercept or Current Affairs or the New York Times.
I read
reporting. Okay, so then you understand that.
Yeah.
And so there's that as an important variable. It's an overdetermined thing. And then there's also the fact that I have no doubt, even using myself as obviously an outlier in a very different case study, but I felt the motivation to go out in 2018 and register something against Trump, even though I have plenty of problems with most Democrats and almost no votes I was casting had anything to do with Trump. So, not, again, especially for normal voters, they're not thinking in these super narrow kind of nerdy ways. They're taking in different impressions and different impulses, and there's no contradiction between a broader dissatisfaction and anger and also wanting to give Trump the finger. I mean, of course not.
Yeah. And when I talk about how decades of failed neoliberal policy helped get us Trump, I am not really talking about the people who might have voted for Trump out of economic anxiety. I am much more talking about poor people and oppressed people who don't vote for Democrats because they don't think it's going to do anything. They just don't vote.
They just don't vote. Meanwhile, in Chicago, however, and I don't really know much about Lori Lightfoot's politics,
I've
to be
heard
honest
really
with you.
mixed things about who's the progressive in this race.
But it is at least notable that Chicago elected its first African-American woman, who is also an openly gay person, to be their mayor. But the more, I think, ideological, perhaps, story is that 50 out of the 50 seats on the city council, at least 5 are going to be held by DSA members. That's pretty
50,
nuts.
50
Hell
seats?
yeah.
Is that a 50?
And it could be 6. The 6th race, or I should say, I think there was already one, but there was another race as of last night. My old friend TW emails me at 9:35 that candidate was down by 47 votes. So good thing to go out and vote, folks.
You vote, you bastards.
But, I mean, I would be very surprised to find out if 10% of the electorate or 11% of the electorate was members of the DSA.
Shocked.
In Chicago.
No, that
is a pretty
That'd be
big,
pretty cool, though, huh?
That is a pretty big number. And it just shows, what energy can do. And it really just shows on some level, cynicism is a waste of energy.
Cynicism is a privilege, and it benefits the Republicans.
Yes, and the idea that you can have 10, maybe, I can't do the math, 11, 12% of the city council of Chicago be members of the DSA, that's nuts. That is just nuts. And
it's a plan so nuts it just might work.
That's
Get
right.
with it, New York. It's embarrassing.
All right, folks.
We got plans. Don't worry.
Just a reminder, and I enjoyed this last night. Calming Comfort. My Calming Comfort blanket. By Sharper Image, it's the luxurious weighted blanket that's designed with high-density comfort fill to promote a sense of calmness for a restful night's sleep. The Calming Comfort weighted blanket comes with a 90-day anxiety-free best night's sleep of your life guarantee from Sharper Image. Right now, our listeners can go to calmingcomfortblanket.com, use the promo code MAJORITY at checkout to receive $15 off the displayed price. Again, that's calmingcomfortblanket.com. Promo code MAJORITY, because you cannot put a price on a great night's sleep. All right, quick break. Head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the number. Just a reminder, this program relies on your support. When you become a member of the Majority Report, not only are you supporting this daily show, sometimes we do news like we did today, walk through a couple of issues that I don't feel will get any attention on the news. Other days we do in-depth interviews. Then what we do is we go to the fun half and we make fun of people for a long time. For the most part, sometimes we have people call in who've made fun of us on Twitter, and then I yell at them. That can all happen on this program.
That's fun in its own way.
I did get
You have failed.
I did get into a little.
I'm gonna get a montage of those Sam drops right there.
Yeah, well, you can't. He's talking underneath me, so we were talking past each other. But on the plan is, I should say, on Friday we're going to pre-record a discussion with Glenn Greenwald and I, which will probably run following Tuesday. It's the idea right now. Anyways. You can become a member and support this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, not only are you supporting the program, not only are you getting the extra fun half if you want it. You don't have to have it. You can just listen to that. You don't have to listen to the other half. It's up to you. But you also get it commercial free. So there's 3 bonuses. And I know every now and then I get an email. Why don't you? You've got it backwards. The fun half should be the free show. The interviews should be the non-free show, but when we have a guest on, a lot of the guests don't have the opportunity to go on many shows, don't get much attention. I think they have great ideas, and the whole point is to amplify those ideas. And if we put it behind because it's all about ideas. We got a clip of Dave Rubin. I don't think he knows what ideas are.
Yeah,
I'm just more interested in ideas.
I'm just interested in things that can't really be in any way where I can say things and they can't be disproved or critiqued.
He's so dumb.
So go to jointhemajorityreport.com. As always, if you cannot afford a membership, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Then wait until I get through the emails, and we'll get back to you and hook you up. Apologies for that. And also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. This is the month to try out those coffees you've always been wondering to try out. 30% off. You don't even need to use the coupon code majority, but you might as well plug it in there anyways. All right, folks. Michael, last night was Tuesday.
It was an excellent show. Kim Ives, the English language editor of Haiti Liberté, talked about the uprisings in Haiti and this mercenary operation, which may or may not have connections everywhere from an apartment building by the BAM in downtown Brooklyn to the Trump administration, and basically an attempted bank heist. Then Malaika Jabali on the why of how Hillary lost Wisconsin and how we can win it, the internal diversity of the African-American vote and how that should affect political analysis. And we made fun of Beto O'Rourke for quite some time and the ANC going into the 2019 South African elections. Patreon.com/TMBS, Patreon.com/TMBS. Michael Brooks Show on YouTube for clips.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we too made fun of Beto O'Rourke with a little rendition, a little update of Fugazi, if you will. We've been kind of falling off of doing our songs, but for those of you who don't know, we are also a musical podcast sometimes. We also had on Rona Lorimer to talk about the Gilets jaunes uprisings in France, which are still ongoing. We spoke about her recent article in Commune magazine, The Yellow Vest Diaries, and I think it was a good conversation. So check it out.
Brendan, you want to talk about anything?
This week on Literary Hangover, Lady Barbarina by Henry James. Story about rich and beautiful American girls heading to England to find themselves through marriage.
Good for you. All right. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I'll take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.